Hello, my friends. How are you today? Welcome to Sewing in Slippers with Sue. Today, we're going to be playing around with some new ideas for applique, things that I have never made before, and things that inspire me in making my applique quilts. Now, if you know me, I am Sue Pelland from Sue Pelland Designs, and one of my mantras, one of my brain training exercises every day is to spend just a little bit of time sewing. And so I have this series of timers all over my sewing room. And what I like to do is once a day, I set that timer for 23 minutes, and I spend 23 minutes a day actually creating, whether that is designing something new or stitching on a project that I already have going. I love to take 23 minutes a day for just pure creative time. Now, if you are like me and you get distracted easily, today is the Sewing in Slippers session for you. Not only are we going to be creating today for the second half of our session, but earlier in the session, we're going to be talking about some brain training for quilters. Now, I had a session yesterday with my students. These are students of my Ahead of the Curve program. They are my my most dedicated applique community. They belong to the membership where they take a workshop with me every single month. So as you can imagine, over the past 3.5 years, I've gotten to know some of these quilters really, really well. And people come and go from the community. Sometimes people come for a month or two to learn what they need to about applique. Sometimes they stick around for years because they find a community of like-minded quilters that just fall in love with applique and want to spend more time together creating. So we were in one of those sessions yesterday, and we were creating this beautiful Baltimore block with the sunflowers on it, and we learned several different ways of doing our sunflowers, including rotary purse or rotary cut applique in 2 different methods. So we certainly had a ball creating this beautiful fall display. But as we were getting started, a few of the members said, "Oh, I'm so far behind. I haven't taken all of your classes. I'm not going to finish all 12 blocks this year for the Baltimore album quilt. I feel so stressed. I feel so far behind. I'm not keeping up with the program." So that is the brain training that I want to focus on today. First of all, why do we quilt? Why do we do what we do? And I'm not just going to ask on the surface, why do you do what you do? I want you to grab a pencil and paper, and we're going to go through a little brain training exercise that's going to get down to the core of your soul to figure out why you do what you do, and sometimes why we beat ourselves up when we don't reach that core goal. And so I want to do some brain training with you first. Now, the second part of our session is going to be creating. Every time I look at what I'm going to cover in the Sewing in Slippers lessons, I'm talking about introducing a technique that may be different for you, whether you're new to applique or you've been appliquing your whole life. I want to show you techniques that are unusual and different, something that you can learn from every single Tuesday. And in order to do that, I have to let go of a project almost as soon as it enters my mind and we explore it a little bit. I've got to then let that project go, so I'm always creating something new. So this gets to my core of why I do what I do. So let's dive into that just a little bit. I need to write down a little note for myself because I don't want to go overtime today like I usually do. I get so enthralled and so excited about this brain training and about the projects that we dive into that sometimes I let one or the other take a little too much time. So I've got my timer set for 23 minutes. That's going to be my creative time. And I want to set my timer for another 23 minutes. That's going to be our brain training time. So I hope you'll spend that time with me today to dive into why we do what we do and then playing with those applique techniques and showing you more ways to do what you love to do. Okay. All right. So let's dive into that little bit of brain training. And the big question is why? I'm going to grab my chair. I love to just sit and have a little chat with you, especially when we're doing this brain training part. And I'm going to be more comfortable sitting so that we can really dive into this. So I hope that you're going to grab a piece of paper. I'm a really good self-beater upper. Beverly, thank you for sharing that. It's very vulnerable, isn't it? When we share with each other what our innermost feelings are, what our why is, and how we beat ourselves up. So thank you for sharing that, Bev. I really appreciate that. Okay, so you're watching from New York. Good morning from Sue Pellin Designs, or good morning, Sue Pellin Designs. Thank you for that. Good morning from Cape Cod. That's Debbie West chiming in. There's Elaine from Mississauga. Excellent. We have some of our regular core group here. And yesterday, some of this core group talked about beating ourselves up and not reaching our goals. So we're going to talk a little bit about goals. We're going to talk a little bit about being realistic with our goals, but what I really want to get into today is diving into your why. Now, as a business owner, I take a lot of self-development classes in the business world. So I do a lot of training in how to run a business, how to make your business grow, how to do online marketing, all of those things that you don't really care about. But one of the reasons why I'm diving into this question of why we do what we do is because of a training that I'm doing for my business. Now, when you're running a business, one of the most common questions, if you're working with a coach, if you're working with a mindset mentor, if you're working with a mastermind group, one of the key questions, and probably one of the first questions a coach will ask you is, why do you do what you do? So I was diving into that question with a brand new coach today. It's not a coach, it's a course that I'm taking, but one of her first questions in the course that I'm taking was, why do you teach quilting? Well, of course, the answer why I teach quilting is because I love quilting myself and I want to share that love with others. And then she asked again, why? Why do you want to share that with others? So I had to think about that. Well, I love what I do, and if other people love what they do, then that's going to bring more fulfillment and more joy into the life of my students. That's a great why. But she went one step further. Why is that important to you? Well, it's because I love people, and I want to bring some joy to other people's lives. I want to make an impact on their life. And really, it's a little bit selfish, right? I want to make an impact in the world. I want to make the world a better place to be in. I want to share what I do so that others can love what I do, to bring joy and beauty in their life. And that's going to make the world just a little bit better place to live in, right? Now, why quilting? Why do I teach quilting specifically when there's so many other things I could be doing, right? I used to work in the textile industry. Why aren't I still doing that? Well, why? Because I want to be successful doing something that I love to do, doing something that I'm passionate about, doing something that brings joy to others. And I love to empower other women to feel good about themselves. So this why is getting deeper and deeper and deeper and going right to the core of who I am and the fact that I'm here to serve other people. That's why God put me on this earth, was to love and serve other people. So getting down to that very basis of my being helps me understand why I do what I do. Now, I wanted to share that with you because it's important to me that my business has a much broader goal than replacing the income that I used to make when I worked in the textile industry. Obviously, that's a part of my life, right? I need to work in order to have a roof over my head and food on the table. And my husband and I both work for that goal. So we're a team and we work on that together. So yes, earning a living from my business is an important goal. But why is that important? Why is that important? Because I want to be a team with my husband. I don't want to feel reliant or dependent on somebody else. I want to feel independent because it makes me feel good to my core that I am self-sufficient. So as I dive into the why behind what I do, it's almost like a tree, right? My big why is because I love to teach other people, but let's look at all these other aspects of my work. How does my success impact my employees? How does my business impact other people? So there's so many branches, and when you keep asking that why question, you get right down. Now, I might start at some of those branches and think about all the little things that my business does. But what it really does is it goes right down to the root of who I am, and it serves all of these needs for me. The need of being self-sufficient, the need of impacting other people's lives, the need for creating joy and beauty in my world, the need for providing for my family and helping my children and maybe leaving a legacy for my children. So I have asked that question why on the very surface level in the past. And this new instructor that I've just teamed up with, this was my very first class with her, it's an online class, she really made me think about things in a different way. So I want to share that exercise a little bit with you today. And I know that you're not running quilting as your business. Some of you might be, but most of you are not. So I want you to look at your why. Why are you quilting? Is it for relaxation? Is it for creating beauty in the world? I want you to put in the comments, what is your why for doing what you do? Now, some of you do have a business. Bev is running a retreat. Bev, why do you run your retreat? Some of you have a quilting business where you're also teaching. So Irene, why do you teach quilting? Some of you have a passion for creating beauty in the world, working with your guild, creating charity quilts. So every quilter comes at this quilting journey from a different core, from a different foundation, from a different root. And I want you to explore your why today just a little bit. Not a little bit, we're going to dive deep. So on the surface, you might say, I create quilts because they're beautiful. I love putting beauty out there in the world. Well, why? Why do you love creating something beautiful? Is it to share with other people, or is it just for yourself? Do you want to display your quilts? Do you want to create something that's worthy of being in a quilt show or even a museum? What's your root cause? What's your root why of why you want to create something beautiful? Now, other people might say, I quilt because it calms me and it soothes me. Well, why? What is it that you are escaping from? What is it that you're using quilting as a retreat from? Is your life busy and hectic? Are you a caregiver for someone else? Why does quilting feed your soul? Well, because I love being surrounded by fabrics. I love touching them. I love feeling them. I love the meditation of that needle going up and down where I can just zone out. Well, why? Why do you want to zone out? Does it give you time to think? Does it give you time to pray? Does it give you time to explore some feelings that are in the background, that you're dealing with stress, or you're dealing with loss, you're dealing with grief? So I really want you to ask that question, why? But I don't want you to just touch the surface. So if you go down 3, 4, even 5 levels, I think that you are going to get to your foundation. You're going to get to what makes you you. Why quilting is a part of your life, and why you do this thing that we call quilting. Is it for the community? Is it for the personal satisfaction? Is it to satisfy your creativity? There's so many reasons why, and every quilter is going to have a little bit different reason. Now, once you start going to the core of your why, let's think about, is it the finished project that is your goal? Is it creating something of beauty for the world as a finished project? Or is it really all about spending the time with yourself doing something that you love to do? Now, there's lots of different levels, right? And we have to keep diving down deep. But I'm going to challenge you to think about why you are quilting, and can we let go of the finished project itself? Do we need to embrace the love of doing what we do over the finished project? And that's really where, before I took this class this morning and dove into my why, this is where Sewing in Slippers was going to start today. I wanted to talk about letting go of the self-criticism, letting go of the self-doubt, letting go of beating ourselves up because we're not where we want to be. So let's talk about that a little bit. Once you know why you are quilting, if those reasons don't have to do with the finished project, then can't we get just as much joy and satisfaction just from being together and creating, rather than getting to the finish line? So yes, we all have goals. I want to make this quilt, and I want to explore this technique, and I want to dive into this quilt, and I want to finish this beautiful work of art before my next quilt show. Yes, we all have goals. Maybe there's a wedding coming up. Maybe you want to make 15 comfort quilts this month to give to your local charity. We all have goals, and we set these goals, and then we continue to beat ourselves up when we don't reach these goals. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic today is because when we do our creative segment today, I'm going to be starting a brand new project. Why? Why, when I haven't finished the journey of my undersea world that I've been creating with you over the last couple of months? I haven't stitched all of those design elements onto the quilt. I haven't made a quilt. I haven't made a pattern. I haven't finished anything. But my why for embarking on that project was to help you discover new ways of doing applique, new ways of embellishing your quilts, bringing you new techniques that you can explore, My goal was not a finished project. I have an under the sea quilt that I have already made, and it's rolled up and behind that curtain. I'm not displaying it anywhere. It's old. It's been at different shows. And do I really need another finished quilt that has the under the sea theme? No, I just wanted to explore the techniques, learn something new myself, like that last bit of the project that I did, making some beautiful fan coral with machine embroidery, free motion, thread play by machine. So I was exploring different techniques, and now I'm ready to put that project to bed. I'm ready to dump that one overboard and let it sink to the bottom of the sea. Now, do I have some beautiful elements that I could add to a quilt in the future? Absolutely, and I'll probably create a project box that has all of my under the sea creatures that I could use at a future time. I'm also going to be writing patterns for each of those design elements to add into the membership. So you haven't seen the last of the Under the Sea project, but the point that I'm getting at is the finished quilt was never my goal. And that's probably true with the project that I'm going to embark on today. Now, you are in a little bit of a different position, right? As quilters, our goal usually is to make quilts. But when you get down to your why do you make quilts? Maybe it's for the love of learning. Maybe you love learning new techniques and you just are like a sponge. You want to soak up all these different techniques and learn something new every single day. That's what keeps your mind working. That's what keeps you creative. That's what keeps your creative juices flowing, is learning new ways to look at things, right? So maybe your end result is not the finished project either. So for members of my community, the Ahead of the Curve community, we get together monthly to work on a project together. And I often hear people beating themselves up saying, I'm not finished with that project yet. I've got 10 projects going on at the same time. I'm never going to finish this project. So these are all these negative words that are self-fulfilling prophecies. If we keep telling ourselves that we're never going to finish, if we keep telling ourselves that we're so far behind, that's where we're going to stay. But if we can look at our projects a little bit differently and say, hey, that was a great learning experience. Now let me put that aside in a box. And if I decide to get to it later, I'll pull it out later. If I decide I never will, that's okay. Not a problem, right? I've learned something and I'm ready to move forward. So going into our why has many different purposes. For me as a business owner is going to be very different for you as a quilter. So I want to talk a little bit about beating yourself up, because we had so many people that wrote that they beat themselves up. They're a chronic beater-upper. I really try hard not to beat myself up, and I've gotten better at that over the past few years. Thanks for sharing that, Debbie. That's fabulous. I'm a great starter, but I'm a terrible finisher. Okay, just saying that statement, how does that make you feel? Does that make you feel less than? Does that make you feel like you're doing something wrong? Or can you give yourself permission to say, I'm a great finisher because I get so excited and I want to keep that excitement level high. So every time I start something, I get really excited. Now, some people are excited starters and some people are excited finishers. And it's really hard to keep that excitement going all the way through. So instead of beating yourself up about not being a good finisher, why didn't we end the statement at, I'm a great starter. I love starting new projects. I love the process of picking out the fabrics, cutting out the shapes, fusing them down. That makes me so happy. And you know, if I get to finishing it, that'll be wonderful. But it's not a priority for me. I'm doing what I love to do, which is playing with fabric and designing, I don't necessarily have to finish everything I start. So looking at your why is going to help you to stop beating yourself up, because it's going to give you permission to do what lights you up, to do what goes to your core. If in your core you're here because you enjoy other people's company, you love sharing your quilting passion with other people that also share that passion, you're here for the community, you're here to light up somebody else's life and make them smile, you're here to give somebody else permission not to finish their project. Those are all great whys, and they're all completely disconnected from a finished project. So I'm going to give you that little challenge today, and my timer's just about to go off because we have come to the end of our little brain training segment. But we will do more brain training for quilters over the next few months, and I'm going to be adding more brain training every time we get together, because I see so many quilters that are so hard on themselves, and I want to give you permission to be a quilter without having the pressure, the self-imposed pressure of finishing every project that you start. So I hope that little brain training segment was valuable to you. And if you did find value in this segment, let me know that you want more brain training. Put that in the comments. Now, if you're here for projects, I am delighted to share an idea that I had with you. And I'm going to start at the very beginning of where this idea came from. Well, Penny, my assistant, who is helping me schedule out these Sewing in Slippers episodes, she said, what do you want to do? Oh, there we go. We're into our next segment, so we're all good. Mr. Piggy here. Thank you. I'm going to, Penny asked me, what do you want to do for your Halloween segment? Halloween is just around the corner, and I think that we need a Halloween pattern to do for your Halloween Sewing in Slippers segment, which happens to be a Tuesday. Halloween is on a Tuesday. So she said, can you do a spider? I said, absolutely. On Halloween, I can do a big, ugly black spider. I hate spiders. But if I make it myself, maybe I can make a cute little spider and have some fun with that. Okay, so she said, let's do a spider on Halloween. And I started thinking about cute little spiders, and of course, what came to mind was Charlotte's Web. Now, I'm not making a Charlotte's Web quilt. I'm sure that there are legalities around that, and somebody owns the right to Charlotte's Web. But years ago, I had drawn a little piggy pattern for using Leaves Galore tools to cut out the face of a cute little pig. So I have a critter series on my website, and some of those critters that I have made are, I have a whole garden series, and the spider would fit perfectly into the garden series. But I also have started a little series on some animals. You may remember that we did a whale at one time, so that's going to fit into our sea critter series. But I also did a kitty cat. Do you remember that one? If you don't remember the cat, I bet Elaine could find it by searching on Facebook. Elaine, if you find the episode with the cat, let me know. I'm working on a pattern for that to go into our critter series in the membership. But I've also drawn lots of other little critters. One of them was a bunny. Do you remember the segment around Easter time where we did a bunny? Now, these are all really just faces. The kitty cat was the whole body. And I had drawn out a little pig, and yesterday I couldn't find that drawing, so I started drawing again. So I do want to do a spider. I do want to do a little pig. And of course, that lends me to the idea of a little barnyard scene with a spider that is nesting in the barn, and my little pig who is looking up over the door of that barn. So I'm going to move over to my workstation, And I'm going to show you my little sketch, which is rough, rough, rough. And I have no idea if I can execute this with rotary cut applique. But that is what we dive into every single time we're here on Sewing in Slippers. Not every single time, because sometimes I have a special guest. But every time that I'm creating here on Sewing in Slippers, realize that I have not created this design before. We are playing with a design. We're going to play together. We're going to figure it out together. We're going to look at different methods that we might be able to accomplish that goal that we're looking to do. So I want to make a barn, I want to make a pig, and I want to make a little spider nesting in the corner of that barn. So let's get started. I'm going to move my camera down to my workstation. So let me go into settings. I'm going to grab the camera that's above my workstation, and you're going to see my fabric stash dive. So in my fabric stash, I dove in to see what might possibly work for this project. And I remembered that I have a barn board fabric in my kit supplies. Now we've used this barn board fabric for the back of our holly wreath that we have for the Season's Greetings project, and that's why I bought the barn board fabric, was to provide kits for Season's Greetings. And the barn board fabric is on my website, sold by the half yard. So if you need 18 inches, you would buy a half yard. If you need 36 inches, you would buy 2 half yards. You'd put the quantity 2 in the yardage area, or in the quantity of the item. So you would end up getting a continuous yard. I'm not going to cut it in 2 half yards, so that if you needed fabric like a barn board fabric, you could get that on my website. Now I initially bought it for Season's Greetings, and now we're going to be using the barn board fabric for our 4-season wall basket. So in making the 4-season wall basket, I used a Tim Holtz fabric, and I have since run out of this fabric. So I've made some kits for this basket with the barn board fabric. It's a nice neutral fabric. It'll look great with all of our embellishments on it. So I thought this was the perfect fabric for the wall basket. The kits are now available on my website. But what that means is I had the barn board fabric out on my table. I was cutting it for the kits, and I realized this would be the perfect backdrop for my little piggy. So here is my sketch, and believe me, it's rough. I had 2 different ear ideas of how I would make the ears, so both of those are sketched on there. I have the basic face shapes. I tried lots of different eyes. I even put some cheeks on my little piggy. So I don't know which type of eyes I'm going to use. I don't know if I'm going to use these cute little cheeks. I have 2 different styles for his nose, all on this little sketch. So now it's time to play with fabric and see how close to this design I can get. Now, when I'm designing a new pattern like this, and I'm calling it loosely a pattern because I don't intend to make a pattern from this, I don't think that that would be appropriate because this looks a little bit too much like Charlotte's Web, and I don't want to use that name or even give that feeling, because it's not, legally it's not right, because this is a copyright, right? Somebody else's idea. But if you love Charlotte's Web and you want to make a pig and you want to make it with rotary cut applique, we're going to explore making a little pig. Now we also have a big moon in the background here, maybe some barn boards around the edges, and from those barn boards around the edges, I definitely want to put a spider web. Now I made my spider web quite tiny over here, and my spider is just a little tiny guy. Now for our Halloween segment, I'm going to make a much bigger spider that could adorn a bigger quilt. And I'm still going to put my tiny little spider up here, but I'll probably make them a little bit bigger as well. So, am I going to create my background first with the barn and the moon and the spider? No. I'm going to create the little pig face first because he is leaning over this barn door, and I'm not sure how big to make the barn door because I have no idea how big my pig is going to be. So the first thing that I need to do when designing a new idea like this is I need to experiment and I need to figure out what's going to happen with this little pig. So I'm envisioning a 9-inch moon back here that I'm going to be cutting with my Rings and Things tools. So I'm envisioning a 9-inch round moon, and then that pig might be just a little bit smaller. So I'm envisioning his face to be roughly 7 inches. That'll give some contrast so that the pig's face is not the same size as that full moon. So let's start there. Let's figure out what we need to do to create our pig, and then maybe the next time we will create the background for that pig to be in. Now, next week, I'm going to be at the Schoodic Institute at our retreat. So I won't be able to, I don't think I'm going to be able to continue on this theme with making the barn up there because I won't have all of my supplies up there. But I wanted to show you that I also have this beautiful fabric, and look at the legend on the side there. Isn't that adorable with the birds and the skulls and the pumpkins? So this is a Halloween fabric, and it would make a beautiful backdrop for my little pig. If my pig is going to be pink, then the pink shows up on this background. It shows up great against the barn board. So I think this palette right here is going to work out quite well. Then I want to think about my spider. Is my spider going to show up on that background? Well, he definitely shows up on the barn board, and I think it even shows up nicely on that background. So this background is going to be a great choice, and it looks like trees in the back of the barn. That's fabulous. Now, even though there's moons in there, we could call those clouds, and I'm going to make a great big shining golden moon. So I did a deep dive into my fabric stash, and I have a bin of fabric under my table. I'm going to bring it up here for all of you to see, right? True confessions of a fabraholic. This is a huge plastic bin filled with fused scraps of fabric. Everything in here is fused. It's all just thrown in there. So I dumped out this big fabric bin today, and I pulled out anything pink that I could find. I pulled out anything that was already fused that I could use for a moon, and I found this gorgeous sparkly fabric. So that is going to be my moon. And then I pulled out all of these iridescent fabrics. These all have threads that are shiny in them. And one of these might just be perfect for my spider web. Well, I'm not going to dive too much into the spider web today because I have lots of thoughts and ideas on how to accomplish that web, either by using a sparkly iridescent fabric or by using some beautiful sparkly iridescent thread. So we'll talk about that another time. I'm not going to go grab that thread as I was thinking because I feel as though we need to dive into this pig before we run out of time. But I think the palette is working, so let's go ahead and start working on that little pig. And I'm going to put all of this aside. I'm going to create a little bin for my background. I'm going to put all of my idea fabrics in there. And I just pulled out some pink fabrics, and these pink fabrics will not be the finished pig. They are all printy. They have all kinds of leaves and flowers and all kinds of things in them. These are not going to be good for a pig, but they're fabrics that are left over from other projects, and I want to actually cut fabric rather than doing this on paper. So I'm going to use these very inappropriate fabrics for a pig and just cut out the shapes that I'm thinking of and see how well they go together. Now, once I make a prototype, then I will make this in fabrics that I actually love for my little pig. So let's get started with that 7-inch circle. When I'm cutting circles, I like to use a rotating mat. Now, my rotating mat is eluding me, as it often does. I never know where I have put that rotating mat. So instead of using the rotating mat, I'm going to work on the corner of my table. And instead of me rotating, instead of the mat rotating, I'm going to rotate right around the corner of this table. So I've just adjusted my camera so you can see cutting on the corner of the table. And I'm going to grab a 28mm rotary cutter with a nice sharp blade, and let's cut that 7-inch circle. So is the head of the pig going to be a full circle? Well, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's going to be a circle, and maybe it's going to be a little bit of an oval. If I do a circle, that 7-inch circle is super easy to cut, and that might not be a bad start for our little piggy. But we also might decide that we need a bit of an oval for that head. And if we do, instead of starting with a strip of fabric like this and just folding it, I would start with a rectangle. So instead of a 7-inch square, I'm going to do maybe a 7 by 8 inch or a 7 by 9-inch rectangle. Let's just go with this. That's about 8.5. Now I would absolutely cut that rectangle accurately, and then I'm going to fold it in quarters. When I fold in quarters, I want to make sure that the longer part is going up and down. I'm going to fold that in half, and then I'm going to fold in half again. So this is the longer measurement, so that's going to be my oval. When I put this fabric on the square of my board, I'm going to be able to use the straight line edge of the tool to create that oval. Now, if I want the oval to be wider, I can move the tool side to side. If I want the oval to be shorter or longer, I'm going to move that piece up and down. Now, I don't want a drastic oval, so I only made the length about 1.5 inches more than the width. And I'm going to see what that looks like when I put the tool with the straight line here along the straight line of the board. And I'm going to go up here to about the 30-degree marking. If I go beyond the 30, the tool starts to dip down again, and I'm not going to have a nice oval. It's actually going to look more like a heart on the end rather than an oval. So let's see. I'm using the straight line here. I went to 35 instead of 30 to make sure that I'm still on an upward slope with that tool to cut out my oval shape. So now I have two choices. I can start with a perfect circle for my little piggy, or I can have more of an oval shape for his head. So you see the difference there? One is just has about an extra inch in the middle before you go out to the rounded sides. So let's work on both of those and see which one we like better. Now, I think that we need to make his ears. And I kind of like the idea of having the ears being pointy. Now, if I looked at these ears, I might say I need to make an ear that is, I'm going to use this flowered fabric because I don't think I have enough of my other fabric. And this one's not fused. That's okay. We're just making a prototype right now. I need to make 2 ears. And how big do I want those ears to be? So I'm going to sketch that out with a little bit of chalk. And I'm going to get an idea of how big I want those ears to be. Now, the chalk I don't think is going to show up very well for you. So I'm going to just think about what I want his ears to look like. They kind of have that shape of a lemon leaf, don't they? So if I cut a lemon leaf shape out of this fabric, I could probably make 2 ears from that lemon shaped leaf. But I really don't want those ears to be super curved. I just want them to be a nice little shape with a little point on the top here. And I'm thinking this 4-inch curve might just be the shape that I need. So I'm going to cut 2 at a time. And I'm going to start here with the A on my tool, because that's going to be the bottom of that little ear. And actually, let me go up to the C. So I have a little bit more than a half lemon shaped leaf. So I'm going to cut this one starting at the C and go up this way. And then I'm going to do that again this way. So where was I? I was at the C. And I want his ear to be rather pointy, so I'm going to come up like this and look at the shape of that ear. Well, that looks pretty good to me. Let's give that a shot by cutting his ear this way. And then if we don't like it, we can certainly make some changes. So I'm going to cut that piece in half. I cut it on the fold, and now I've got 2 little ears. So let's see what that looks like. Oh, cute. That is really cute on the oval shape. What does it look like on the rounded shape? Well, yeah, I mean, it's cute on the rounded shape. Either one would probably work. I think I like the oval shape a little bit better. So I'm going to go with that oval shape for the shape of my piggy's face. All right, remember, we're making a prototype here. So is he going to have flowered ears in the end? No, probably not. But do I want a little bit of a different color pink inside of that ear? Yeah, you know, it's probably going to be a lighter shade of pink. This is a darker shade of pink, but just to give me an idea of what that inner shape would be like, I'm going to do the exact same thing again. I'm going to cut from C on up, and then when I cut the other side of that ear, starting at letter C, I'm going to make this a little bit skinnier. So this ear is 1, 2, 3 1/4 inches wide. This inside is maybe going to be about 2 1/2 inches wide. What does that look like? 1, 2 1/2. Let's see if that's going to look good. So I'm just making a little center for his ear. I'm going to cut that one in half, and I'm going to put one inside the other. Now the contrast on this fabric may not be great, but I think you'll get the idea if I bring it up close enough to the camera. You can see that I've got the inside of the ear and then the little lip around the ear itself. So again, I'm using scraps of fabric so that I can play with these ideas and not have to make a final decision until I'm on my good fabric. So I like that look of one color inside the other. I wish I had used the real dark color so you'd be able to see the contrast a little bit better, but we can do that again later. All right, now I need a little nose for my piggy. So I'm thinking a 5-inch half circle. But when I made the 5-inch half circle, I decided if I incorporated that into his smile, that it would be nice to have a rounded bottom on that half circle. So let's go ahead and cut the top half of the circle for his nose. And we're going to use a different curve down here for his smile. So let's think about how big his smile is going to be. You know, that's not bad. I kind of like the 6-inch curve for his smile. And what happens if I put a 5-inch curve on top of that smile for his snout? Well, yeah, that looks really cute. It might be a little bit big because I still have to fit some eyes in here. But I think I'm going to start with 5-inch. And if I don't like the 5-inch, I can always cut it down to 4 inches, right? I can't increase the size once I cut it, but I can definitely cut it down if it's not quite right. So let me move my camera again. Sorry, you're not seeing where I am. So I think the 6-inch smile is good. An 8-inch smile would probably be too wide for his face. It's definitely too wide for his face. So I'm going to use the 5-inch curve to create the top of his snout. Let's go ahead and cut that 5-inch curve. Now remember, I have to rotate around because I couldn't find my rotating mat. It wasn't handy when I started cutting. So I'm just rotating around the corner of the table. And now I want to cut the bottom of that snout. Well, I want to make sure that I'm centering the 6-inch curve to cut the bottom of his snout. So I'm going to fold that fabric, place it on the board straight across. I want to use the 6-inch curve right in the center. So I'm going to place the A from the 6-inch curve right across the bottom of that piece and curve that upward. Okay. So looking pretty good. I think that might be a little bit big. I might want to go with the 4-inch curve, but let's stick with this for now, and then we're going to make his little eyes. So for his eyes, I think we definitely want this oval shape instead of the little beady eyes you can see initially. I drew some little beady eyes in there. And then I drew these oval shape eyes, these cartoony eyes, and I like them a lot better. So I need an oval shape, and I think that needs to be from white fabric. Well, I didn't get any white fabric prepared, but I have a little off-white here, and that's going to be good enough to get us going. So how big is his eye going to be? Probably about, maybe 1.5 inches wide. There's 2 inches. I think that's maybe a little bit too big for his eyes. Maybe we're going to go 1.5 inches or 1 3/4 inches. Let's try 1.5 inches. Now I definitely need an oval shape, but really the bottom of his eye can be tucked up under his snout. I don't need the bottom of that eye to be perfect. So what I really want is just the top of his eye to be rounded. So I have cut this at 1.5 inches, and I don't have 1.5 inches Hearts and More ruler to round that with. This one is 1 5/8 inches, but I think that's going to be close enough. So I'm going to fold this eye in half, and I'm going to round the top half using the Hearts and More ruler. Now I think I'll make it about 2 inches tall. So I'm putting the fabric here 1 inch and 2 inches. I'm putting the arrow on the fold of the fabric, and the rest of the circle just rounds out that piece. Okay, so there is the top of one eye. Pretty good. And here is the top of his second eye. Now these might be a little wide as well. I might want to cut this down to 1 inch, and in which case I can use the 1 inch end of my Hearts and More tool to round it. But I'm going to go up by 2 inches from the bottom of this fabric. I'm going to put the arrow on the fold, and I'm going to round off this top edge once again to make a matching eye for the other side. Now, pretty good, pretty good. Inside of his eye, we need a little pupil. That's going to be done with a little bit of black fabric, maybe a little bit of, maybe it doesn't need to be pure black. I might want to use a little gray fabric for his pupil, but let's just go ahead and cut a little section with the Hearts and More tool with the 1 inch end. So I just need a little bit of an oval here, so I'm going to do half of an oval, and I'm just going to put the straight line right along the straight of my board and come up and around, and I think that's way too wide for his eyeball, but let's test it out. Right, so I think I might do this and overlap those two, and then use my rotary cutter or my scissors to take off the excess. Not bad, right? Just a little corner of that eyeball showing. And if we do one eyeball that way, one. So I used the Hearts and More tool. I came over here from 30 on up, from 30 right here. I'm using that straight edge to just make a little oval shape. Now it doesn't have to be perfect, because what we're going to do is we're going to place it on this oval shape, and then we're going to cut off the excess that's hanging over the edge. You could do this on your applique pressing sheet to put the two of them together and then cut off the little black that's hanging over the edge. And yeah, that looks pretty darn cute. Okay, it's coming together. Now I might need to adjust his eyes a little bit. I might need to put this one up a little higher. I might need them to be a little bit more round, but the idea is getting really there, okay? It's really shaping up to be the little pig that I want. Now I do think his snout is a little bit large, but before we make that decision, let's make those little nostrils. Well, guess what? We have these little pieces left over from cutting off of his eyes, and if we have one going this way and one going this way, that is just adorable for the little pig's snout. Now, the final thing that I may do is put a little round cheek on there. And I'm not sure how big this little cheek should be. Maybe using the 2.5 inch tool. Maybe that's going to be a little bit too large, but we can always cut it down. We can't add it, but we can always cut down. So let's go ahead and cut a little 2.5 inch cheek here. Remember, I should be using my rotating mat, so I'm going to need to rotate around to get these circles cut out. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm rushing through this a little bit, and I'm just feeling my way through it. I'm just being creative, playing with some different shapes. This is the first time I've done it, so my final pig might be just a little bit different from this, but I love to play with all of these little ideas. Now his cheeks could puff out a little bit. They can go out a little bit beyond the oval. And then I'm absolutely going to be stitching in that smile. So as my little piggy smiles, I'm going to be adding a line of stitching here. And that stitching is going to go up into his little cheeks, up into his little cheeks, so that he's really out there smiling. All right, I am really enjoying this pig design. I think that he is looking rather cute. He's a little bit like my drawing, but he has a look all of his own. And I want to play with this a little bit more before I go too far. I think maybe his cheeks are a little too big. His snout might be a little too big. I might decide to go with a 4-inch snout instead of the 5-inch. His eyes, I think, are pretty darn good, but I might just lift them up a little bit and have them here at the corner of his cheek. So I might move these bits and pieces around just to give this pig a little bit more personality than what he has right now. Well, I think this is a great start to our little barnyard quilt. What do you think? Why don't you put in the comments whether or not you think I should continue on the barnyard theme? I know that in Sherry Noel's book that I made a sheep called One Sheep, and that one sheep was made with circles from the Hearts and More tools. I think that we could design a little barnyard collection. I love it. Why don't we eventually plan to make a sheep for the barnyard, maybe a duck or a goose? We probably need a little rat, if you remember your story. There's always a rat walking around that barnyard. We can make pigs. We can make a cow, possibly. What else would you like me to explore? What kind of animals do you have on your farm? How should we play with the Hearts and More and the Leaves Galore tool next in order to add and enhance this idea of critters in the barnyard? So let me know your ideas. I would love to hear what you would like me to create next. You all get a vote in this. And when we have some time, possibly at Schoodic next week, we could do a brief demonstration and do a small segment on sewing in slippers to show you a little bit about what our retreat is like. We can walk you around the room, show you what people are working on. So I probably won't do a barnyard animal that day, but I won't put you off. I'm not going to say we're going to cancel our Sewing in Slippers with Sue for next week. We're just going to do a guest appearance from Schoodic Peninsula, and we can talk to some of our retreaters. How does that sound? All right, I'm coming up with new ideas every day. If you enjoy getting together with me and sewing in slippers together, please like and share this video on Facebook or on YouTube. The more you like and share, the more other people will discover rotary cut applique for the first time and a little bit of quilters brain training. So please let me know if you enjoyed the brain training exercise today. Diving in 3, 4, 5 layers deep with why we do what we do as quilters. I will see you next time on Sewing in Slippers with Sue from the Schoodic Peninsula in beautiful Maine. Bye, everyone.